What's up, people? Got a preseason game to talk about, and this time I actually watched pretty much the whole game. Didn't see part of the fourth quarter just because I lost interest, but I watched the entire first three quarters, so I definitely got a good picture of what the game tells us in terms of what this team might be this season. And it was a really good game. There were a lot of good things to take away from it. So I'm going to have a lot of positives to go over with maybe one or two things that I think could be better. But no team in the league is going to be perfect, and that's just something you have to deal with as a team in a salary cap era league. So took on the Broncos last night. Whooped them pretty good. Took them out. Final score really doesn't mean much of anything, but 40-10 sounds pretty good, and the starters were playing for most of the first half on both sides, so it wasn't entirely meaningless, just mostly so. So let's start with special teams. I guess we'll go ahead and start in the third phase of the game that people don't talk about as much because this special teams unit was fantastic last year, and they look just as good, if not better, this year. The return game, we've got so many different players who can return kicks and punts. Golden Tate, Jermaine Kearse, Percy Harvin, obviously, when he gets back. We got a couple other quick guys who we could throw out there in a pinch, which is good because that is a high-risk position. Like, if we want to put Golden Tate back there to return punts, that's fine. But if something were to happen and he got hurt on a punt return, I'd feel really shaky about that because he's one of our best receivers, and I think he's a uncommon talent. You know, he's somebody who can break tackles. He's somebody who can make people miss. He's somebody who has a lot of upper body strength. He can go up and catch difficult passes. Just a rare talent and somebody who's a key part of this offense. So to me, if we send him back there for a punt return and he gets hurt, that's something we might really regret. So it's nice to have a guy like a Jermaine Kearse who might be able to do kickoffs. I mean, it's just one play, but he took it 107 last night. It was his first time kick returning since he was in Lakes High School, which is literally like 4 minutes from where I grew up. And he also went to Washington, where I went to college. So he's somebody I really wanted to make this team, and as it stands right now, I think he will, and if he can find a way to contribute as a kick returner, all the better. So yeah, the special teams, the coverage was great, the tackling was great, the blocking was great. I mean, this special teams unit is absolutely ready for a championship, and that may seem like a small thing to a lot of people, and for the most part it is, but you're going to win one or two games a year or lose one or two games a year on the strength of your or weakness of your special teams. So I love that we've taken care of that because there are teams out there with bad special teams units, and if you don't get that cleaned up early, you're really going to regret not taking care of that earlier on. So that out of the way, offense. Some people, like the guy I live with, a little concerned about the offense after last week. They had 2 drives, had 7 plays in 2 drives, didn't score, didn't really move the ball. Last night was fantastic for the most part. There were a couple of drives, like near the end of the first quarter and the start of the second quarter, where we weren't really moving the ball, and then we'd pick up a penalty, and penalties were a little bit of a theme throughout the night, so that's probably the one thing you can really criticize. But the offense looks ready for the season, in my opinion. My philosophy on preseason football offensively is you want to see them look good for at least a drive or two. You don't need to see them look good the whole game. That's not going to happen. Why would you have them exert themselves like that in a preseason game? But you want to have at least 2, maybe 3 drives through the preseason where the offense looks good. Last night, we got that, absolutely. The starting unit with Russell Wilson playing quarterback and the starting linemen and most of the starting receivers, they marched down the field twice for touchdowns, the one to Kearse and the one to McGrath. Obviously the special teams unit set them up with great field position. The defense set them up with fortuitous opportunities by forcing quick punts, and they took advantage of those opportunities when they were there for the most part. There were a couple drives where maybe we had the opportunity to move the ball a little bit. Maybe we got the ball in Denver territory and didn't move it, but offenses, even the best offenses, don't score every drive. So you see that and you go, should I be concerned? But then you step back, you look at the big picture, and you're like, oh, the offense put up more, 20, I guess it would be 24, 25 points. That's good enough to win most games. So the offense is there. Only real concern I would have offensively is there were a couple times where the run blocking wasn't there. Early in the game, we had a 2nd and 1 that we didn't pick up, and then we had a 3rd and 1 that we barely picked up. Maybe that's because Carpenter's not out there yet, James Carpenter. I don't know when he gets back. I think our offensive line could survive without him, but he's a road grader, mauler, run block type offensive lineman, and if we don't have him out there, he makes our running game that much more ineffective. So I'd like to see him back, and I think if he's out there, that just makes those short yardage situations much easier to pick up. And then the defense, which was, Denver's going to move the ball. I mean, Denver moved the ball last night, and people who watched the game last night know the game was closer than the score indicated. And there were 2 instances where Denver got to a long drive put together and drove basically the length of the field. One time they picked up a touchdown, and the other time they ended up turning it over at the 1-yard line. But, Denver has one of the best offenses in the league. They're going to be deadly this year. And for us to mostly stop them, mostly contain them outside of maybe 2 drives is stellar. But beyond the fact that we were able to hold Denver up pretty well, this defense just looks ready to go out there and dominate. I mean, they're hitting hard. They're making good tackles outside of, I think there were 2 plays last night where we blew a tackle that could have killed a drive, that allowed a drive to continue because we missed that tackle. The defense is, going for the ball. They're forcing turnovers. They're finding ways to make plays. You really couldn't ask for much more in that regard. The only thing, last night, watching that game, the first unit pass rush was not there yet. And that's not a surprise. We don't have Chris Clemens yet. He's expected to come back for week 1. Bruce Irvin will be back in week 5. But the first unit pass rush needs to get a little better. Now, the second unit, at least when they're going up against the Denver backups and the San Diego backups, those guys are great. We've got a long list of backup defensive linemen who were doing a tremendous job getting pressure last night and last week. So if those guys can translate that performance even a little bit to playing against starters, then we've got a lot of guys who can get after the quarterback who we're just not going to have room for on this team. So to any teams out there that need another pass rusher, watch our end of preseason cuts, and maybe you can poach one of them. Me, I'm kind of hoping that they can make it down to the practice squad, but I don't think all of them will. I don't see how we can keep all of them one way or the other. But it's nice to know that we've got some capable backups in that regard that can get after the passer. They got after Brock Osweiler later in the game, and that's really the only thing you can call them out for. But you can't really complain about it when they're hitting as hard as they were last night, forcing the turnovers, making plays in coverage, getting tackles behind the line of scrimmage, all that stuff. You can't really complain about it. So as for, individual players who stood out, obviously Jermaine Kearse, going to make the roster now, I'm sure. Steven Williams, I hope we have room for him on the practice squad because he's made a couple plays this preseason, but as for the active roster, I just don't see it happening. We've got 5 good receivers that I feel good about with Harvin when he gets back. Harvin, Rice, Tate, Baldwin, Kearse. So I don't think there's room for him on the active roster right now, but down the line, in a few years, if he's still kicking around the practice squad because nobody else picked him up, then maybe so. It's hard to pick out a name on defense other than Brandon Browner. I mean, Browner was absolutely dominant last night, making plays, obviously forcing the fumble, scoring the touchdown. Great game by Brandon Browner. He's in mid-season form already. He looks like an all-pro cornerback. It looks like he's faster than he was last year, so nothing but positive things to say about those guys. Really, other than that, there's not too much else to say. Some of the young linebackers got play. They played really well. And you're coming away from these first two preseason games going, the defense gets driven on every now and then, but they've given up 20 points in 2 games. And they're playing backups a lot. I understand that, but we're playing our backups too out there, and it's nice to know those guys are at least performing to a high level. They're forcing field goals, and they're preventing scores. 20 points in 2 games. You'll win most games you play if you can hold another team to 10 points. So the problems with this game, short, sweet, penalties. We had a lot of penalties last night, and I think one thing we need to do is accept that this team might get more penalties than average just because we play aggressively, we play physical, we hit hard, and we're going to pick up a couple extra flags a game just because of that. Like Baltimore, in the old days, the Ravens used to do that because it was a good trade-off for them. And in the last couple of years, the Lions have done that, but that wasn't a good trade-off for them because they still weren't any good. So that's just something I think we might have to deal with, but the formation penalties, the procedure penalties like the false starts, and the pick plays on offense. I think we got whistled for 2 offensive pass interference calls. And, to me, those are things that have nothing to do with being aggressive. They're just not having your head completely in the game. So we do have to clean that up. Penalties were a little bit of a problem last year. I don't want to see penalties be the only thing that holds this team back when the regular season starts. So that's basically how I feel. Great game last night. Fantastic game. This team is ready for the season. And let's get to Carolina in a couple weeks. See you guys then.